covers all of the rights and obligations within the employee-employer relationship.
Most of these laws focus on the employer, who in turn engages you as the employee. These laws cover all aspects of employment, ranging from compensation, benefits, working conditions, and even termination.
We want to make sure that we cover all of our bases and you're well equipped to become generation wealthy.
Shameless plug much?
Girl, you know we have to represent. Well, let's get right into it. These are 11 of the major laws that we believe that you should be aware of. We're going to go through each one of them and give you real-life examples to make sure that you understand.
The first law we're going to talk about is the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. This law prevents employees who engage in union activities from being fired and allows employees to organize and bargain with their employer.
So let's let them know a little bit more of what a union actually means.
A union is an organized group of workers who unite to make decisions about conditions affecting their work. They work similar to a democracy. Workers have elected representatives that serve as their voice and make decisions on their behalf.
So let's give you guys a real-life example. Let's say that you work in a factory and you and your coworkers are unhappy with your wages. You decide to create a union and collectively organize against this and fight for higher wages. Your employer would then not be able to threaten you with job loss.
The Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 is the next law, and this might be the one that you're most familiar with because it established overtime and minimum wage.
There is a federal minimum wage which serves as a baseline, and then every state has the right to establish their own minimum wage as high as they want, as long as it doesn't fall below the federal baseline. Minimum wages are usually established based on the standard of living in your area. Have you ever noticed that some cities are more expensive to live in than others? Well, that's exactly what we're referring to.
The second part of this law is overtime. If you're an hourly employee, overtime pay is paid for any additional hours worked over a standard work week, which in the U.S. is 40 hours. Overtime pay must be at least 1.5 times an employee's regular pay.
Title VII, or the Civil Rights Act of 1964, prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin.
An example of violating this law would be if you were denied a promotion because of your religious beliefs, or not being hired at all because of how you look.
I wish somebody would try me. I'm so glad there's laws like this in place to prohibit this from happening.
The Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967 prevents discrimination on the basis of age against employees who are over the age of 40.
All right, so let's give an example of this. Let's say that your grandmother walks into a fast food joint and she wants to get a job. She notices that everybody there is between the ages of 14 to 18, and then they look at her and notice that she's clearly over the age of 40, and they're like, yeah, Grandma, we're not going to hire you here. You're too old to work here. That would definitely be illegal. Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 basically establishes safety standards and employees' rights to refuse in unsafe environments.
This law protects us against working in unsafe environments that would be hazardous to our health. An example of this would be working in a factory where you're dealing with hazardous chemicals and not given the proper materials and equipment to handle them.
The Employment Retirement Income Security Act of 1974 prevents employers from being discharged solely to prevent them from vesting or qualifying for benefits under a qualified pension plan.
A pension plan is a retirement plan that requires an employer to make contributions into a pool of funds that are set aside for a worker's future benefit.
Usually you have to stay at a company for a certain amount of time before you can actually qualify for these benefits. Once you've been at the company for the required time it takes, then you've vested.
Let me give you an example. If you worked for a company for 30 years, and in 2 years you'd qualify for a pension, and at that point the employer decided to fire you to prevent you from vesting, that would be violating the law. Employment is normally at will, meaning you can get fired at any time, just not for this specific reason.
The Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 prevents discrimination against employees on the basis of national origin or citizenship status.
This law made it illegal for employers to knowingly hire individuals unauthorized in the U.S. and established a system for employers to verify legal status of employees.
The Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1986, also known as COBRA, geez, that was a mouthful. Yeah. I'm sure that's exactly why they abbreviated it for COBRA. But what COBRA basically means is that it guarantees the extension of your health benefits even after you've been terminated.
So let's just say that you quit your job, or you were terminated and are out of work for a couple of months. Under this law, you'd be able to keep your old benefits at the same rate that your employer provided. The only difference would be that you'd be responsible for the total cost of insurance, including your employer contribution. Now, this can be expensive, but it's often better than having no coverage at all.
The Americans with Disability Act of 1990 prevents discrimination against disabled employees.
Similar to the other laws we've talked about, this law protects you against discrimination if you are disabled. This could include and isn't limited to mental disability, physical disability such as inability to walk, or if you have a speech or hearing disability.
The Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993 guarantees a 12-week unpaid leave for illness, childbirth, or to take care of an ill relative.
What this means is that if you had to leave work for an extended period of time for any of the reasons listed, you'd still be guaranteed a job when you came back for up to 12 weeks. Notice that this is unpaid. Many employers offer paid versions of this for a shorter period of time as part of your benefits package when you accept a job.
The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, also known as HIPAA, limits exclusions from the employer-sponsored coverage because of pre-existing conditions or medical history.
So let's just say you get a new job, but you've fallen seriously ill, and your medical care will in turn require higher costs. Your employer is obligated to provide you with the same benefits that everyone else is receiving.
Okay, so we covered quite a lot today. We talked about employment laws that protect us against all sorts of discrimination, compensation, benefits, the rights to those benefits, and many others.
Yeah, and hopefully this summary of employment laws will help you feel better equipped to handle whatever situation you face in the workforce.
And if you do run into one of these situations, you can always contact your Human Resources Department.
But what if your Human Resource Department is the one who you believe is violating these laws?
Well, that's actually a really good point. Have you ever noticed that work in high traffic areas like your break room or the cafeteria? There are these huge posters that are posted that are actually required to be posted by your employer that cover a lot of the laws that we've actually talked about today. And these posters usually have a hotline that you can contact if you don't feel safe at work and you want to let somebody know of what's happening. We love to hear your feedback and questions, so make sure you leave them below and give us a thumbs up.
Yeah, and if you haven't subscribed to GenerationWealthy.org yet, please do.
Employment Law 101, Scene 2, Take 1. Employment Law 101, Scene 2, Take 2.
We have to cover all
Yes, we have to cover all our bases to make sure. We have to make sure that we cover all of our bases so that you are well equipped to become Generation Wealthy. We love to hear your comments and feedback. So, what happened? Oh, I didn't even notice.